Thank you so much and welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. And when Jules asked me to come along and speak, the first thing that I was reminded of was that we are social animals. So when Jules talked to me about what this was about and the topic to talk about, the first thing that came to my mind really was about relationships. And how, as we grow older, these relationships can support us to be happier and healthier individuals. And as human beings, we're social animals, and we're actually literally wired to connect. We have these neurons in our brain called mirror neurons, whose job it is to help us connect on a rational and an emotional basis. So that's really what I want to explore, is how relationships can help us, particularly as we grow older, to sustain our health and to sustain our well-being. And it's when we're deeply connected that we most find meaning and happiness. So how do we know this? So we know this, one of the reasons we know this is because of a Harvard study that was undertaken. And in this Harvard study, they asked groups of people, what does it mean to be successful in life? And it's interesting, they recently asked some millennials the same question. And funnily enough, they actually came up with the same answers as they did back in 1938 when this Harvard study was established. So, get rich, become famous, and work really, really hard were the three things that people said they would find meaning and happiness in. Well, this study is an 80-year study. It's the longest and largest study of people aging. And at first there were 238 participants from Harvard that were Harvard sophomores that were included in this database. Some people went on to be doctors, some lawyers. There was even a US president. So JFK was actually in this group that was studied. They later expanded this study to include people that didn't have the same advantages in life as these Harvard graduates. So they included over 456 men from Boston, from inner Boston. And these people didn't have those advantages. So they studied these men for 80 years, year after year after year. And they didn't just ask them or a tick box in a questionnaire. They really studied them. They studied their brains. They gave them brain scans. They studied their bloods, their health. They got their doctor's information. They talked to their families. They talked to their friends. So what are the lessons from these thousands and tens of thousands of pages of documents? What were the highlights? Well, it turns out there are three big lessons from this. And the first lesson is that social connection is really good for us, and that loneliness can actually kill. Other studies have shown that loneliness can be worse than smoking and alcoholism. So to socially connect is paramount. And those people during the study that they documented had these deeper and more sustained relationships. We actually found that they were not only happier when they were 80, they were healthier as well. Their brain functioning was better, their memories were better. When they had physical pain, even though they had physical pain, they still had a great day. So their mood wasn't as affected. Those people who didn't have those relationships aged faster and their memories declined. So it's a great study, and I'd encourage you, I've only got 17 minutes to share with you, but I would encourage you, go look at this, because the insights are absolutely incredible. But what I want to talk about today is, how about you? Where are you with your relationships? And what's your commitment to moving forward? And what do great relationships look like? Is it maybe giving up some screen time and connecting with your grandkids? Is it that, you know, going for a long walk with your partner, doing something new with them? Well, one thing that we know is that relationships are enhanced when we utilize our emotional intelligence. And this emotional intelligence that I'm talking about is not just a nice to have. We can actually measure levels of emotional intelligence. You can learn to get better at these competencies that I'm going to share with you. And the most important thing, you can put these into action to live a more meaningful, more effective, deeper connected way of life. So this is the model that I'm not going to go through in detail today, but I'm just going to choose one of these competencies that we know is incredibly important. This model is really about your self-awareness. So how aware am I? How am I feeling when I'm interacting with certain people, if we're thinking about it in return of relationships? What are the patterns I've got with this person? Do I always end up arguing with them? How do I feel? Is this first part, the blue part, that's about your self-awareness, reflection. Then the red part is about, let me stop before I fall into these patterns and create a different way of interacting with this person, this other human being. And then this third part is the why. And for me personally, this is the most powerful part of this model. Why do I want to connect more with people? Why do I want to show up in a more meaningful way with them? And to do this, we need empathy, and we also need our pursuing noble goals. And I noticed that one of the other speakers is going to talk about this purpose. So I'm going to talk about relationships and increasing empathy. So these are the areas of success that we know are enhanced when we increase our emotional intelligence, but we're going to focus on this relationships. So here's a lovely statistic. We know if you increase your emotional intelligence, then you've got a 55% chance of, in this case, increasing your relationship quality. Why? Well, let's think back to that Harvard study. Because you will be happier, you will be healthier, you will be more emotionally, psychologically, and physically more able as you age. So increasing empathy. We hear a lot about empathy, and it's one of the most powerful emotional intelligence competencies, yet it's one of the most challenging. To actually make space for someone's feelings and to connect with them on an emotional level so that they feel safe and they feel respected. People who aren't empathic can't create these deep and meaningful relationships that lead to this better health. So there are three types of empathy, and these three types of empathy are cognitive. And I'd like you to think, as I'm going through these, which one of these is your strength? We need all three, but which one is really your strength? So the first one is cognitive empathy. Knowing how the other person might be thinking. At a cognitive level, how might they be feeling? This kind of empathy is good if you're negotiating, it's good if you're motivating people. And a study at the University of Birmingham found that managers, leaders who have cognitive empathy are much better able to motivate people. So if you, in your lives, want to motivate others and yourself, then this cognitive empathy is very, very important. Then we've got emotional empathy. This is when you physically can feel what the other person is feeling, because emotions are contagious. How you show up will impact how other people around you feel. So my question is, when you show up in any interaction, how do you want to make the other person feel? And be aware of how they're actually making you feel too, because it's, as I say, it's contagious. And then we've got this responsive empathy. It's compassionate empathy. And with this type of empathy, we don't just understand a person's predicament, but we can spontaneously help if needed. Now, this is a big thing. Sometimes responsive empathy might just be listening carefully to somebody, or it might be actually doing something, but we need to think about all of these 3 types of empathy to form those deep and meaningful connections. When we dive deeper into this, we have these things that we call brain talents. And the 3 brain talents that are most useful for connecting at that deeper level and increasing relationship effectiveness are connection. So building a rapport. You yourself are open to their emotions. It's kind of like a human Wi-Fi, if you like. You can feel what other people are feeling. You connect with other people at their level. Emotional insight. And this really needs that empathy to understand others, your relationship with them, and collaboration. How can you both build effective relationships together? And there's many ways that you can do this. We're going to explore one now through an activity, but just a few tips before we move on. Notice in your conversations, are they surface level conversations? Or are you actually noticing people's body language, their tone of voice? What's behind, what's underneath these words? Reflecting on those relationships, and by using all of those parts of empathy. So that's enough from me. I'd like now for you to do an activity around this. So with your pen and your paper that you have in front of you, I would like you to write 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's all. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. And when I ask you these questions, I don't want you to write the question down. I simply want you to write the first words that come into your head, okay? And then at the end, we'll put these together. Okay, so, we ready? Number 1. In my relationships, I want to see less. So write what you want to see less in your relationships. Number 2, instead, I want more. Instead, I want more. What people around me need to do to do this also is, what people around me need to do in order to do this is, and finally, number 4, personal qualities I want to strengthen so that I can help achieve this are, personal qualities I want to strengthen so I can help achieve this are. Okay, so you should have at least 4 words there now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Now what I would like you to do underneath is to write this sentence and insert the word. Okay, here we are. Here's the sentence. I will become more. Insert the word from number 4. I will become more to help people. Number 3. So my relationships are more. Number 2. And less. Number 1. So you should have a sentence now. I'll read you mine that I did earlier. I will listen more deeply to help people connect, so my relationships are more meaningful and less conflictual. So you will have your own sentence. And my question to you is, with this sentence, how committed are you to this? Will you show up, showing more empathy, connecting more, so that you can form those deeper relationships, not just for yourself, but for those people that you care and you love deeply? And also the added advantage, as we know from the Harvard study, you'll age better. Your memory will be sharper. You'll have better health. You will be able to show up on those days even when you've got physical pain. So remember to put this into action. Be smarter with those emotions. Don't just react. Be more aware of them. Be more intentional. And remember this sentence, which is to be more purposeful. How you want to show up, how you want your relationships to be. And as we draw to a close, I'd just like you to reflect. Fast forward 20, 30, 50 years, even maybe when you're not here. What's your legacy? What do you want people to say about you? About their grandparents, about their parents? How they made them feel? And I'd like you to commit to one step that you can take to increase your relationship effectiveness and quality. One element from the last 17 minutes that you can put into action right now. So thank you so much for spending the last 17 minutes with me. And I look forward to hearing through NLB and Jules of how you're putting this into action. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. That was a really, really deep exercise for a lot of us. And we do have some questions here. So one of the questions that has been asking is that for a lot of people here, they have been together in a relationship for many years. And sometimes there's so much baggage around those relationships. And one party might be trying their very best to improve the situation, but the other party may not be reciprocal towards the improvement or towards effort, towards counseling. What do you say about that? Sue, I think you're muted.
Yeah, great question, actually. And the Harvard study, it didn't say people had perfect relationships. It said, if you know that you can rely on the other person, that's the key. If you know they're going to be there for you, whether you bicker every day, about things, whether you disagree about things, the point was that they found, if you know that somebody is there for you, then that has the effect on your health, on your well-being, etc. The second point there was about the reciprocal element of it. what I always say is you cannot change anybody else's behaviors. Having said that, my own research and other people's research shows that when we practice emotional intelligence ourselves, so when we show up in a different way, then other people generally can't react in the same way, because it shifts that interaction, it shifts it. So it's shifting the other person's emotion as well. So we can do what we can do. And it's really interesting because the study also found that in those relationships where people can't rely on other people, it can be even more detrimental to health and well-being than getting divorced, which is interesting too. Yeah, but we know that if you work at this from your personal perspective, things change around you. And we know because emotions are contagious and we have this mirror neuron system, that when we are utilizing certain emotions, they are contagious. So my recommendation really is focus on you and focus on, you know, your purpose and what you want out of this, as well as what's best for those other people around you. And then things generally do start to change.
Thank you, Sue. I think it's very important for us to look at ourselves before we judge others whether have they done enough. So following on what you have just said, I would love to ask Chris. Chris, what is the Stoic philosophy point of view towards relationships and conflict? What are the values that people can take on when we talk about relationships and conflicts?
So I think where the Stoics come down is that relationships are supremely important, but what we should be putting focus into is enjoying them and appreciating them in the moment. There's a famous saying, or a famous thing that a philosopher called Epictetus wrote, which was like, when you kiss your child goodnight, think that tomorrow they might be gone. And on the face, that seems really confrontational. Well, I'm kissing my child goodnight, but I'm imagining that they're not going to be here tomorrow. But what it's really about is a call to appreciate them for what they are in that moment, rather than all of the things that we put around those relationships. That'd be one of the views that the Stoics would have.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Chris, actually. And one of the things I say to people is, imagine this was your last day on the planet. What do you want those people around you to remember? What's your legacy? How are you going to show up? Yeah, couldn't agree more.
And so, yeah, you are right. You know, one of the best people to ask is Michelle. Michelle, do you have any stories of seniors or people who are in palliative care, and how do they cope? How does couples cope when they are dealing with terminally ill patients? What are the experiences that you can share?
Yeah, I think from my experience, it's really, really emotional to witness couples being separated by their impending death. Yeah, so usually what I do is I encourage the couple to share, you know, what are the most treasured moments or memories that they treasure most about each other. What do they love about each other? What do they appreciate most about each other? And having that moment to reminiscence about the positive moments and precious memories they shared with one another throughout their life stages is really powerful, and it gives a good closure to each of their lives.
I think, Michelle, you are really in a very privileged place where you can see life, the beauty of life, and the fragility of life at the same time. So everyone, Michelle is actually a medical social worker from Dover Park Hospice. So Dover Park Hospice is an institution that believes in palliative care, not only for the body, but also for the heart and soul. So their tagline is that every moment matters. So Michelle, would you like to start your sharing and let us know what is your perspective on this topic?
Sure. Okay. Allow me to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay. So Thank you, Julie's, and hi everyone. I'm Michelle, working as a medical social worker in Dover Park Hospice. So I really like to thank Singapore University of Social Sciences and National Library Board for this meaningful opportunity to share and learn from everyone in this special occasion as we celebrate the International Day of Older Persons. And thank you to everyone who are online with us today and making time out of your precious Saturday afternoon. I'm really excited and looking forward to learn from everyone today. So maybe as a start, I would like to invite everyone to maybe spend about 30 seconds to input into the chat box what are 3 things that makes you happy, and it can be anything that brings you great joy and comfort. Thank you everyone for your meaningful inputs. So like as I can see from the chat box below, so for some people it's enjoying good food. For some of you, maybe savings, spending time with our friends, listening to good music as well.
Their dogs.
Exercising as well. Yeah, so it's really indeed a great joy to be able to do things with our loved ones that makes us very happy. Thank you everyone for your inputs. Okay, so as we zoom out into Singapore's current demographic landscape, we are at an era of growing wisdom. Singapore is currently facing an increasingly aging population caused by increased life expectancy over the past decade. We can expect to live longer as we pursue after the good life that we wish to achieve. With the tremendous development of medical technology, attempts at maintaining life of the terminally ill have become more realistic and possible. And we can see that the average lifespan for Singaporeans have gone up to 85 years old and 81 years old for females and males respectively. The desire to maintaining life at all costs and not to give up has also meant that the medical system would often find that the death of a patient represents a failure, and the topic of death and dying still largely remains a taboo topic within our society. As we touch on this topic, I would like to invite you to spend some time with yourself, reflecting how would it be like if you are unable to do and engage actively in things that makes us happy anymore. And what if one day you are being diagnosed with a terminal illness by the doctor? What would a good death mean to you then? Keep that answer and response to yourself. So in Dover Park Hospice, I mainly work with patients who are diagnosed with a terminal illness with a prognosis of less than 1 year. Palliative care is an approach that improves the quality of life of patients and their families facing a life-threatening illness through the prevention and relief of suffering by means of early identification, assessment, and treatment of pain, as well as supporting one's emotional and spiritual distress. Palliative care provides symptoms relief, and it affirms life and regards dying as a normal process, and it neither hastens nor postpones death. It also integrates the psychological and spiritual aspects of patient care and offers a support system to help patients live as actively as possible. So in palliative care, we also use a team approach with a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, and a pastoral counselor to address the needs of patients and their families to enhance their quality of life when faced with a terminal illness. It's applicable early in the course of illness in conjunction with other therapies that are intended to prolong life, such as chemotherapy or radiation. So the hospice philosophy originated from Dr. Cecilia Saunders, who was a medical social worker, then a nurse, and eventually a doctor. In 1967, she founded St. Christopher's Hospice in southwest London. She proposed the idea of total pain, which included the physical, emotional, social, and spiritual dimensions of distress for patients who are diagnosed with a terminal illness, and she regarded each patient as a unique individual to the very end. Dying is not a failure, and the aim of palliative care is to help a patient live with the best quality of life possible, with a combination of a multidisciplinary teamwork and the family being part of the unit of care. So this is a glimpse of my daily life at the hospice. Patients at the end of life often experience a myriad of complex psycho-emotional issues as they are being confronted with their own mortality. My role encompasses conducting ongoing psychosocial assessment, working with the multidisciplinary team to formulate a care plan for the patients and their family members. I also help to conduct financial counseling and apply for financial schemes to benefit needy patients, as well as assisting with their practical, legal, and funeral matters, especially for patients without family members. After the patient's death, I also help to provide bereavement support for late patients' families and refer to religious leaders when appropriate. Allow me to share a story of my patient, late Madam Sutia, whom I journeyed with for almost 6 months at the hospice. So Madam Sutia is a 90-year-old single lady. She's the eldest among 6 younger siblings, and she can be described as a lady with a strong sense of independence and dignity. I witnessed the different stages of grief that she experienced from the point of her diagnosis to the stage of acceptance towards impending death. It was a journey on an emotional roller coaster with many ups and downs, and it was not easy mastering the courage to accept one's impending death and to say the last goodbyes. Madam Sutia was a lady that carries a rich life wisdom and experiences with her, and she invited me and our hospice volunteer Julius to capture her life stories and values in her life storybook that she wishes to leave behind with her loved ones. The reminiscence of her past experiences for life review purposes also helped to make meaning of her life and anchored her self-identity towards the end of life. Her book also enhanced family bonds for meaningful closure, as the book encompassed her personal messages that she wished to leave behind with her family. In life, what we say to each other really matters, and perhaps more so at the end of our lives. Words can be profound gifts, and I wonder how often do all of you say I love you to your family members, and all the words in the world is the simple words like I love you, thank you, I'm sorry, and I forgive you are words that can bring the greatest comfort for the dying and be the greatest blessing to those who remain behind. Her valuable life storybook also serves as a keepsake for her family members and the continuity of bonds even when she's no longer around. In a Singaporean survey, only 50% have ever talked about death or dying with their loved ones, and only 36% feel comfortable talking about their own death based on the Lien Foundation survey. Death has somehow become like a stranger and an enemy that's feared. However, the fear can be less paralyzing when we talk more openly about it. Excuse me. It is helpful to spend moments of personal reflection throughout your life stages, and to think about what's important and meaningful for you, such as in the areas of your relationships, your lifestyle, religion or personal beliefs, your healthcare preferences, and your financial legal matters. So actually thinking through these issues on your own before sharing with your loved ones allows you to reflect on what's important to you, and this process will help you prepare for more open conversations with your loved ones. So these are some informal and formal documents that can help us to document our personal preferences and wishes related to our healthcare and financial matters. So by documenting and sharing our wishes in advance, such as our preferred type of care, our concerns on illness and suffering, our definition of living well, our concerns for family and other family members, how we like to be remembered, such as our funeral arrangements, the legacy you wish to leave behind, will be very helpful to give your loved ones a sense of assurance that they are making decisions based on your preferences and interests. So not all our loved ones have actually the same degree of understanding of what's important to you. So it's important that we nominate at least one person who understands our values and preferences and is able to share this information with the healthcare team and speak on your behalf when you're no longer able to speak for yourself. This would also help to assure that you are receiving care consistent with your values and wishes and ensure better quality of life at the end of your life. As I come to a close, I hope that one day death would no longer be a taboo subject associated with death and with pain and fear. There is a need for us to break the silence over death and dying, especially our population is aging rapidly, so that more are prepared and will live their last days well. And one's good life can indeed be celebrated before death. Just like the priceless legacy that Madam Sutia had left her loved ones before dying, life can still be lived to the fullest, even when death cannot be avoided. So going back to the question that I posed to all of you earlier, I wonder what would a good life and a good death mean to you then? And I would also like to take this opportunity to say thank you to my late patients and their caregivers for their valuable life teachings and good memories we had shared together. And wherever you are, you'll always be in my heart. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I definitely remember Madam Sutia. So the story for Madam Sutia is that Dover Park tried all kinds of means to fulfill her last wishes. And there was even once where we brought her to the beach and she actually dreamt of wanting to cycle. So what Dover Park did was that we rented a family bicycle and all the volunteers cycled her around with her sitting on the bicycle. And she was saying that, it brought her so much memory. She felt as free as she was when she was a teenager. And that is really one example of how Dover Park Hospice really truly catered to the needs of your patients, especially in terms of their spiritual care, in terms of their emotional care. So, Michelle, there is a question that comes in. There is a question of whether are there instances of unhappy patients? Are there patients that have common regrets? And what do you do to manage these patients?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Yeah, so sorry that my voice sound a bit weird today because I just recovered from a fever and a sore throat. Yeah, so yeah, it's very common that we come across patients who experience a few life regrets and things that they are unable to come to a closure. So when we encounter patients like that, we try to we try to work with the patient very closely as well as their family members to see whether how can we maximize every opportunity to fulfill their last wishes and enable them and their family members to come to a closure. Yes.
Thank you, Michelle. You are really the embodiment of what Dover Park Hospice is, to really make moments matter. And just love your energy, and especially when you are interacting with your patients. So thank you for being here despite you not feeling well.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah. So Sue, I do have a question for you. Given that so many of us here are facing illnesses today and facing diseases, chronic illnesses or pain, what will be the competencies that you think will be useful in terms of EQ for people to deal with such challenges?
So yeah, sorry, Jules, you cut out a little bit there. What challenge was that you?
Okay, so I was asking, what do you think will be the EQ competencies that will be helpful in terms of managing our emotions, especially when we are recently diagnosed with chronic illnesses or with diseases.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you just can't imagine the mix of emotions that must be going on in somebody's brain when you're actually told something like that. And, you know, the whole model really in terms of being able to navigate that emotional data, the sadness, the despair, the why me, the questions that must come up. Personally, my father was diagnosed with lung cancer when he was 58, and he was given a month to live. So I have a little bit of an insight into that, and the emotions just stick with the fear, the terror that actually occurred. For me personally, and no one way is the way, but for me personally, it was connecting with that purpose, that the relationships in this last month that we've got together. How do I want him to feel? How do I want him to show up? So I really had to navigate my own emotional data of despair and sadness, etc., to be there for him and to talk about the things that Michelle mentioned, the memories that we'd made together, the things that I was going to go on and do. Yeah, it's tough. It's very tough. But I think, you know, the ability to link to that purpose and to use that empathy, whatever our emotions are, and to acknowledge them, because sadness is there because we've loved. And if we weren't sad, then there wouldn't have been love. So I think it's just utilizing emotions smartly in those moments. And it's hard, but I think that purpose, how you want to show up, and just understanding that emotions are just there to give us a message, important messages. And in this case, to connect with somebody who really needs us at the end.
Thank you for sharing, Shu. And I'm so sorry to hear about your loss. Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
I think all the audiences here are really very blessed to be learning from your experiences as well as Michelle's experience. So there is another question here, Sue, that I think you can perhaps try to share. There is this question of toxic family members. So sometimes even in terms of, you know, there are some negative family patterns that are existing in people. So how do they manage that, especially when staying away is not really an option?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really interesting question because you use the word toxic, and going back to the Harvard study, it literally is toxic. You know, some relationships are toxic because they produce the neurohormones, the chemicals in our body that actually lead to stress and lead to that stress escalating and escalating, which can lead to disease in itself. So, you know, emotions and these toxic relationships are bad for our health. So, you know, the question is, and again, every individual case is different. It's no one size fits all, but it's assessing really how important is this relationship to you, and what's the conversation that you need to have with this person in order to tell them the effect that they're actually having on you as another human being. And you can do the things that we mentioned in my chat earlier on, but ultimately, if somebody decides not to step out of those patterns of behavior, then you have a very, very difficult choice to make. And, you know, there's also been a lot of research about children in toxic patterned families, you know, and how detrimental that is to them as well. And the question is, how important is the relationship to you? And are you going to need to step out of your patterns and your ego, your protection mechanism, in order to change that and to shift that by using your knowledge of yourself and your own emotions, but choosing something different? Yeah.
Thank you, Sue. I think it just boils down to the fact that you have choices, even when you don't have any control. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you and I have had discussions. Choice and control are different. You know, we have choice, but we might not have control. And when we change our choices, it has a knock-on effect, generally. Thank you.
Brilliantly said, Sue. Yeah. So, Michelle, I do have a question for you. Can you give us examples of families that have been distanced away, or families that are full of conflicts, but how do they end the final day? How do they say goodbyes when they have this kind of conflict within the family? Can you share with us some examples?
Yeah, it's very common as well. We encounter families who share strained relationships throughout their lives. They lost contact with each other throughout their lives. And finally, at the end of life, for some of my patients, they wish to reconcile with their family members. They wish to mend broken relationships. And sometimes for some patients, it's very, very difficult to verbalize their emotions, deep-seated emotions that had been buried for so many years. So when words are difficult to verbalize, we encourage them to use other mediums, like perhaps we work closely with our therapists, like the art therapists, the music therapists, to use these mediums to verbalize their deep-seated emotions, so that it can be translated to their family members when they find it difficult to say it verbally to their loved ones.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I think that's a very stark reminder for a lot of us to really work on our relationships and not just let it stay stagnant the way it is. So with that, I would love to introduce Mr. Chris Brown, who is the co-founder of the Singapore Stoics Meetup Group. Chris Brown is the co-founder of this group that meets several times a month to discuss modern practical applications of the ancient philosophy of Stoicism, where meaning comes not from what you have, from having character rooted in virtue. So Chris has a range of experiences, having lived in many parts of the world, including Australia, Germany, and France. And he also has a new rescue cat named George. So Chris, take it away, please.
Thanks so much, Jules. Well, hi, my name's Chris. As Jules said, I'm a practicing Stoic. And we might talk a little bit more about what Stoics are and maybe what images that you might have of that over time. But, you know, one of those things that you might think of as a Stoic is someone that, you know, squeezes down their emotions and never cries, right? But it's actually quite far from the case, right? What Stoics were concerned about was one question in particular, which is how we can live good lives. And that step towards something that they called eudaimonia, which is a particular type of happiness, and it's the happiness of a life well lived. Now, before I continue, I want to acknowledge that I'm in a tricky spot here. Here I am being invited to talk about values and finding meaning in life and walking towards happiness, and I'm talking to a group of people with far more life experience and wisdom than I have. So everything that I say today comes from a place of humility and also gratitude as well, to learn from you and the other panelists as well. So the Stoics saw themselves as stewards for people around them. And they were savvy enough to realize that our values change over the course of our lives, but we still need a North Star or a guiding principle to help us guide us towards this idea of eudaimonia. So someone that was in need of a North Star was Hercules. We all know Hercules, right? He's the demigod, right? Strong, wearing a lion pelt, carrying a club, doing impossible things, right? But what we don't hear about is the young Hercules, the Hercules that was lost and afraid and did not have a purpose in life. And we find young Hercules walking down a road, and it's a road that started nowhere and it was headed nowhere as well. Until young Hercules happened across a crossroads with one road leading left and the other road leading right. And at the crossroads, there were two beautiful women standing there. And as Hercules got a little closer, he realized that these were no women, no normal women anyway. These were clearly goddesses. And the first goddess stepped to Hercules and said, Hercules, my name is Hedonia, and I implore you to take the left path. If you take the left path, my path, I can promise you a life of wealth, privilege, and power. You will never want for anything. Women will throw themselves at your feet and men will beg to be ruled by you. And when you die, you will die atop a massive mound of treasure and a legacy that will reverberate through the ages. Tempting, right? Hercules considered her offer, and the other goddess stepped forward and said, Hercules, I can't offer you anything that Hedonia offered. But if you take my path, the right path, I can promise you this, a life of struggle, a life where the hardships of other people become the hardships of yourself. Whenever you put down a burden, you'll be asked to put up another burden on your shoulders, even heavier than the one before. You might not even be thanked. And if you are rewarded, any wealth or power you do accumulate will feel hollow and empty in your hands. But what I can promise you is this. When you die, you will look back at a life well lived. Now, Hercules at this stage had an intuition, and it's an intuition that might be shared by some of the people on the call today. And that intuition was that Hedonia's path, the left path, was a false path to take. So he walked up to the second goddess and said, I commit myself to walking down your path, the right path. What should I call you? And the goddess said, my name is Virtue. And to help you on your quest today, or help you on your quest, I'm going to give you 4 companions to walk with you. And their names are wisdom, temperance, courage, and justice. And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit more about today. And that's these 4 guiding principles. But before I do, I want to talk a little bit more about the Stoics and what they saw as important. So they saw, and just quickly, I mean, the Stoics were a group of Greek and Roman philosophers from more than 2,000 years ago. But a lot of their wisdom still holds true today. So what they saw as really important, the most important thing, was the idea of reason. They saw reason as being the crowning glory of the human condition. Because it was reason that separates us from everything else. Reason is the thing that allows us to contemplate our own deaths, to love, to form family and friends, to come up with collective fictions like money and trust that help us build societies, and thoughts and imagination about futures real and imagined. So if we put reason as this greatest good, something to walk towards, we need some guideposts, some North Stars to help us get there. And that's where the virtues come in. So let me introduce you to these virtues in a little bit more detail. So the first virtue is wisdom. And this is the virtue of agency or self-control. Because at the heart of the idea of wisdom is this idea that there is no good things or bad things in the world. It's only our opinions of those things that make them seem good or bad. And when we assume this, we assume agency and control over our lives. So someone that's very wise might value things like clarity, rationality, and forming accurate maps of reality and ways to explain their sense and their meaning into others. Now, our next virtue is the one where we're concerned with our physical body and our reactions to things. And this is what I've called self-mastery, or what the Stoics might call temperance. And this is the virtue of balance. So this is not about denying our pleasures, but it's not about overindulging in them either. It's about enjoying them the right amount and fully. It's also not about never speaking your mind. It's not about always having something to say. It's about having the right thing to say at the right time. And someone that has generated a level of self-mastery or sees this as important might see things like patience and discipline and self-reflection as particularly just virtues to walk towards. Next is where we turn this idea of our thoughts and our bodies into actual manifestation, creating something in the world. And this is the virtue of courage, and this is the virtue of action. So someone that's very courageous might value things like creativity, entrepreneurism, and manifestation, actually creating things and turning thought into physical action. And then finally, we've got the virtue of justice. Now, this isn't crime and punishment justice. This isn't, you've been very naughty, so I'm going to send you to prison, right? No, this is the virtue of society. And a just person might value things like kindness, fairness, and love. So these become our four virtues, our four guiding principles or companions in a quest for living a meaningful life. Now, at this point, you might say, well, why these four virtues? There are lots of things that are important to me. And in fact, we can go back into the chat right now and take a look. I mean, Michelle asked us what makes us happy: health, friends, family, beauty, kindness, love, connection to nature, work, right? We've got all these values. So why are these virtues so important? And the way that the Stoics explained it was this, is that these virtues become hinges where we can hang our values from. Because our values change over time, and they're also very personal as well. So I'd like to encourage us all to do an exercise together where we can turn a little bit more, make this a little bit more real, and link this idea between our personal values into these four virtues. So again, if we can take out our piece of paper, and I'll walk through this, and then we'll have a few minutes to go through this as well. I'd like you to select one of the virtues that means something to you. So anything on these pages: wisdom, self-mastery, courage, or justice. Don't overthink it, but just one that speaks to you. And then go ahead and underneath it, identify one or two of your personal values that relate to this virtue. And you can use one of the values that I posted up in the page before. You could use a value that you find in the chat platform here, or even better, something that is really meaningful for you. And then from there, go on to write 2 sentences. One, what does the right path look like? So what does life look like if we move towards harmony with that particular value? And then the second question is the opposite. What does the left path look like? So for instance, if we were walking away from that and working towards discord. So let me give you an example, right? So the virtue that I might select is courage. And what courage means to me is creativity. And when I know that I'm in harmony with creativity, I know that I spend each time writing down my thoughts and sharing them with others. And when I know that I'm moving away from creativity, it's just when I sit on the couch all day and watch the news on TV and don't do anything. So again, take out our pen and paper, and maybe if we can just go through, just for 1 or 2 minutes, to go through this quick exercise, and then I'll talk about it just a little bit more. So once again, I'll put up the instructions here. So selecting that virtue that means something to you, identify 1 or 2 of the values that relate to that virtue, and then it's that right path, left path sentence. Really trying to make that meaningful for your life and personal. And again, we've got our virtues down here and a selection of values, but please bring out your own one. So we might say 60 seconds, and I'll just go through and see if there's any questions that have come up in the chat that I can address now or hand back over to Jules. All right, so you might be moving through this exercise, maybe got a few moments to go through. That's all right, we can spend some time. So what this becomes is that what I'd really ask you to do from here is reflect on this and see if you find some value in this. There are many ways of finding meaning in our lives, and this is one that speaks to me, and it might speak to you. If you did find value in this exercise, I'd really encourage you to go through and create a full view of your model of virtue. This only works when it becomes personal and specific. And when we have these signposts or milestones to tell us that we're moving towards the right path or the left path there. Well, on that, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm going to hand back to our moderator, Jules, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the group may have.
Thank you so much, Chris. I think what you're sharing on values is particularly pertinent to our society today. Every time whenever there's a topic on values or the topic on how we can live better, there's always this question of cultural differences. And you've lived in many different countries before. And you having a meetup group in Singapore and facilitating those discussions, how does cultural differences play into these virtues and different belief systems that philosophy can bring?
That's a good question. There's certainly certain trends that I see. I certainly see that from the group and the discussions who are very culturally diverse as well. I certainly see in Singapore a tendency to move towards ideas of duty, especially to our family and to our parents. And that's not something that's necessarily as prevalent as New Zealand, where I grew up, or Australia, where I spent some time. And maybe in Europe, maybe sort of a little bit more 50-50, right? Somewhere along those. So, and I certainly see values shifting towards material success as well. Not so much just in Singapore, but across the world, and especially in younger people coming through. I think the big thing to pull out of here, though, is not to get too attached to our values, because they do change over our life. So for instance, I'll give you an example. When I was, I don't know, in my 20s, being a good parent wasn't very valuable. Like, that wasn't something that I valued, right? I appreciated that there were good parents in the world, but for me personally, being a good parent, because that was before my daughter was born. Of course, as soon as my daughter's born, that idea of valuing parenting and good parenting became the most important thing in my life. And then as my daughter grows up and becomes older and more independent, that doesn't become, that value changes subtly, where you become, where things like being a mentor and giving back to society become more of a value in conjunction with being a good parent, because there is that level of autonomy. So I think that this is an ongoing exercise that we need to go through, and it only works if it becomes deeply personal. And the only way that we get there is by really looking deeply inside and reflecting.
Thank you, Chris. And there's some people who talks about how there's a conflict between people who value justice, for example, being accurate in judgment, and is contradicting to showing of kindness, being accommodating towards failures. So Sue has said that such judgment will create emotions that will not support compassion, connection, and collaboration. So from a Stoics point of view, are there any contradiction between those two?
So it becomes a very nuanced topic to investigate, right? So going back to our parenting example for a moment, right? We can be kind and loving, but still have, still encourage our children to obey us as parents, and have, you know, discipline. And if they escape from the rules, right, they're disciplined in turn, right? Whatever that might look like. So justice isn't about being soft and everything goes, and it's okay if you break the rules because I love you and everything else, right? It's not saying that there's not consequence with breaking the rules. And of course, this is what we see, you know, in society as well. But we can always do it in a compassionate way.
So thank you, Chris. I think what you shared is really very important. And I think the questions brought up also puts us in a deeper reflection of our own values. And sometimes, because I've come across a lot of times where when we are sharing something and people say that, oh, my religion has already covered all that, I know everything. So it's really important to come with a beginner's mind and really take on whatever insights that resonate with you and really be receptive to new things and new learnings. So yes, Chris, thank you so much for sharing. And with that, do allow me to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Joseph Yeo. He's the event director and co-creator of LDEX Asia. And he's one of the brains behind conceptualization of LDEX Asia for more products, services, and technologies that are available to improve qualities of life and increase longevity and retard frailty. So Joseph, please continue with your sharing.
Sure, thanks very much, Jules. Let me just pull up my slides. And while I'm doing that, very good afternoon to everyone. And thank you so much for taking the time off on a Saturday afternoon to be with us. And I know it's been a really, really tough many months where we started with the circuit breaker and then all of us have to come onto Zoom. And I think we're kind of getting used to being able to interact freely on Zoom. And as the city slowly opens up, we will have more opportunities for physical meetings and all. And and also a very big thank you to SUSS as well as NLB for having me here to be able to share a little bit of practical perspective on what we can do in terms of enhancing the quality of our lives and all. And congratulations to SUSS Gerontology program for the 10-year anniversary. Now, are you able to see my slides?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so when I was asked to talk about the options to enhance meaning and quality of life, I was thinking this is such a huge topic. And having listened to Sue, Michelle, and Chris, I think there's a lot of the emotional side of things and looking into the practical side of things. So allow me to share a little bit about myself and what I do. So I come from a so-called IT background. I've worked for tech companies over 15 years, dealing with tech stuff, trade compliance, trade shows, demonstrations. And so what triggered me to start thinking about how we can empower seniors and to future-proof seniors. It comes from a very personal experience, actually. My dad is very inspiring. He's 83 this year, and he is totally, absolutely independent. And he has taught me all his life to little things that he has picked up to stay active. And from my perspective, I really want to share something good with what I feel could help a larger population, a larger group of people. And when we started thinking of LDEX, which is an elder care exhibition and also a conference at the same time, what we want to be able to do is to be able to bring in different products, a comprehensive spectrum of products, solutions, and services to be able to help us live longer and better. And more importantly, to be able to retard frailty. Some highlights from what we did last year, we had our inaugural launch in November last year. So for those who have not heard of us, we were able to bring in about 100 and over exhibitors from Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, even New Zealand, US, and Canada to allow us, to give us perspective into different areas, products, be it services, or things that we can leverage on in our everyday life to help us age better. If you had missed us last year, the next show is going to be in November 2021. So if you want more information, you can go to our website. I won't elaborate too much here, but just to have a quick recap about what the world map is going to look like in 2030. So as you can see from this map here that I'm sharing, by 2030, there will be 34 nations whereby more than 20% of our population is going to be over the age of 65. And you can see our little red dot here. It is also very red because we are going to be considered a super aged nation. So what we can see here is that the entire globally everyone is going to face with an aging population crisis. And looking into some reality check that we have, I believe these facts are already well known and out there, most of us know. In Singapore itself, nearly 500,000 Singaporeans are age 65 by 2030, and we are all living longer, longer lifespan, and Singapore itself has topped the world in life expectancy in 2017. So our average lifespan at birth is at about 84.8 years, and this is surging ahead of Japan. And on average, Singaporeans spend about 10.6 years of their life in frailty. So we are living longer, but we also spend a longer lifespan, part of our time dealing with frailty and managing in coping with different onset of diseases and all. And one of the eye-catching headlines that caught me was there will be about over 80s who will outnumber those who are under 5-year-old. So this is kind of like a scary moment for us and scary facts. So if we are living longer, what can we do and how can we ensure that we can live a better quality life and more meaningful lives? Just a quick run through of definition of what quality of life is. I would like to categorize the quality of life into 5 different levers. So health, happiness, income, leisure, and vitality. So these are the areas which total up to what we would be able to focus on to improve in these different levers, to balance it. Of course, this is an individual perception. You have to zoom into which area you feel that it is a priority to you. But in totality, if we can achieve meaningful, if we can achieve good health, happiness, and to have a more balanced aspect of these 5 levers, we should be able to look into improving the quality of our life. Now, there are different products out there, and I'm going to break them down into 6 different segments that we can look at, whereby we can improve the areas on quality of life that we have. So lifestyle and wellness is one aspect that we can look for products, services that could help us. So if we look at sports, there are things we can do, food supplements, functional food that we can look into, anti-aging products that are out there, active aging programs. So there are products that could help monitor health, for example, and there are books that we can look into. If you are a caregiver, how do we actually enhance lifestyle of someone you're providing care for? And another aspect we can look into improving would be in the area of architecture, design, and fittings. So we can explore areas like elderly friendly homes and facilities whereby we can age in place. We can look into putting fittings into our home, redesigning our home to make it obstacle free. We can look into senior friendly environments that we can start creating and redesigning. So if we look at this little picture here, I want you to spend maybe about 30 seconds to see if you could spot any difference between these 2 pictures.
That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. So almost similar design, but if we look at the products that are placed into it, so this is what we can do in terms of enhancing a living environment for a senior versus what a ordinary adult can do. So for the picture on the left, if you look at it, there are more drawers, ovens at the eye level, longer wall cabinets, these are functional aspects that could help senior maneuver around the kitchen. And so in the picture on the left, we have a taller unit, oven at the base. So it's an environment that's perhaps a little bit more suitable for a younger person. And so there are areas we can look into to enhance our living environment, our living spaces and all. Another aspect of how we can improve or age better, we can look into different healthcare and rehabilitation solutions. Now, healthcare equipment, dementia care, diagnostic services, we are even looking at different types of wheelchairs that could help us with our mobility issues. So these are just different aspects that we can look at. Now, technology, digital and IoT is another area that could help enhance our quality of life. So wearables, such as what you see here in this picture, is exoskeletons that could help someone with mobility issues. And as we move into more technology-based telepresence consultation with your doctors, it eliminates the need to travel outwards. And there are also sensors that can be placed at home to help health monitoring and all. And the other aspect we should be looking at, or we could look at, would be finance, your legal legacy planning. So plan well for your retirement. Look into proper investments. There are investment products out there, so we have to be very careful what we deal with and all. And the making ourselves ready for the 100-year-old reach target, because as we live longer, we want to be able to leave behind certain things for the future generation and all. So proper retirement planning is a great aspect. Now, the other aspect that we hardly talk about, there are products out there that could help us plan for our afterlife. And apart from the funeral planning that we, planning services that we look at, I think an important area where we hardly talk about is the conversations, getting conversations ongoing to celebrate the life that we have led. So we could look into different aspects about how we want to document our life. And I think earlier on, we heard about what Michelle shared about method studia. And I think this is an area that we can learn to document what we want to see for what we have in the future. Now, so in terms of how we want to enhance what the quality of life is, we need to adopt a different attitude and start creating habits. So lifestyle habits and attitudes that could influence our ability to live healthy, meaningful, and joyful lives, even from when our metabolism starts to deteriorate, when we slow down, we often have options to help us age successfully and be better equipped to be able to live longer, to live better. And even for the people around the age group of 30 to 50, this group who are providing care for the elders today, who will eventually become the elders of tomorrow. So we want to be able to have different options to be able to help us cope with that. Now, is aging an option? Aging is not an option. We will all eventually age, but aging well is an option. So I want you to be able to look at identifying the different levers and habits that's important to you in the aspects of health, happiness, your income level, leisure, or vitality. And from there, you start to develop your own stories. Now, all of us have been, so there are things we can learn from people overseas. So if we look at Japan itself, they have this group, pop group called KBG48. And this is a band that comprises of members who are all over 80, and even there's a centenarian as a senior member. So there are things we can do. So the one of the more inspiring books that I have read was written by an author, Gerald Maserati. He talks about how he learned to play tennis late into his 50s. So late to the ball is something so it's never too late to learn something. And there is a painter, a nail painter, a book called Old in Art School. It describes how a retired history professor from Princeton started to learn painting even after she retires. And Ernestine Shepherd is someone who is known to be the oldest bodybuilder of the world, and she didn't start to exercise until she was in her late 80s. So what I'm hoping that we can learn from these individuals is that it's never too late to create memories or to create a purposeful and meaningful quality life. So what I would like to do here actually is to have a small little exercise where I want everyone to start thinking about what we can do in terms of creating memories and in terms of leaving behind a legacy that could be very, very meaningful. So start by making adjustments now. Do something that you have been putting off doing for a very, very long time. The pandemic has made us rethink about what is important, and some of our priorities have shifted in life. And when we look at the 6 different segments that offer us products and services that I talked about earlier, where we can age better, we can consider options where we can elevate our happiness level, define your purpose, create new memories, share resources, and to create a caring community. So if you take the same piece of paper that Sue had asked you to do, perhaps write down one thing that you have been procrastinating for a very long time and that you have always wanted to do that can elevate any of the quality of life habits that I spoke about earlier. So it could be something like repairing a relationship. It could be a goal to write a play, a poem, or it could be something to create new memories like documenting a family cookbook from the recipes that you have collected. Could be a family collection of jokes, or even something you want to do in investing in a product that could help improve your lifestyle, or a plan to redesign your home to age-proof it. So write that down on that piece of paper, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to think through. So as you're writing, what I want you to do after that would be to keep this piece of paper. You can either send it in a mail to yourself and review that 6 months later to see what you have done to achieve that particular goal that you might want to achieve. And please, whatever we do or whatever you plan to do it within the permissible period of the opening up of phase 2 and phase 3. So learning, it could be learning a new language and all. So something that's purposeful and something that we can create new memories in. And for those of you who feel that perhaps we may have a very contented life, we can think about helping someone else to improve their quality of life. And you may be a caregiver to someone, to help a parent, to help your grandparents, to help a friend who is in need, or it could even be something that you want to set a goal for in the next 3 to 6 months. And keep that piece of paper. You can either post it to yourself, or you can even write an email to a friend in confidence and set a timeline on your calendar, 3 months, 6 months, and remind yourself then to open it up and review it at that point in time to see what you have done. Have you made a commitment? Have you done something to improve the levers of the quality of life?
Thank you, Joseph.
Yeah.
I think your exercise, the last exercise, is really important for people, especially those who are watching on Facebook and as well as people here in Zoom, because I noticed that a lot of times, as age progresses, we stop living lives that are non-linear. Like, for example, we think that, like life, once we are at peace, once we are happy, then we just get stuck in that comfort zone and we don't really take action or commit ourselves to more activities, and really writing a letter to themselves and then checking in another 6 months later. I think that's a brilliant exercise. So there's a question here that we are hoping that you can answer. So seniors have been a target of unethical marketing, especially when they're desperate to get good health or certain outcomes that they want to improve. So what advice would you give to seniors when they're making decisions to improve their quality of life and seeking happiness in that way?
Can you repeat the question in the earlier part, Jules?
Okay. So I was saying that seniors have been a target of a lot of unethical marketing. For example, when they are desperate about improving their health, or when they are desperate to seek their happiness, what advice would you give to seniors when they are making decisions to improve their quality of life, or when they are seeking that level of happiness?
Right. So first thing first, we always have to back check. And I think understanding your needs to begin with, what you are looking for. And when you talk to someone or when someone offers you different options or different products, it's important to fact check that. Talk to more people about what you're hearing. Do your own research online. So I think one of the things about the beauty about internet these days is that you can get information, but sometimes a lot of misinformation as well. But do your own research, do your fact finding, talk to your doctor. I believe one of the more insightful information we can get would be from your own family doctors or from friends who have had knowledge about what they're looking for. So stay away from scam. Be very careful what it is to offer. Understand what your own needs and how these products could affect you. And so this is one aspect I think we could look at.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, this is especially important because the internet can be a double-edged sword, especially people are very new energy, and then they need products that are out there to help them. And really, it's really important, especially when you are looking for a quick fix. And sometimes whatever that's out there is so tempting and delicious that you just fall for it. Yeah. So another question that we are hoping that you can answer is, when providing for care and services, how different is it when you are providing care and services or products for elders of tomorrow compared to who they are today?
Right. So we are all at different stages of life. So if we look at the category of someone who is disease-free and the category of someone who is perhaps suffering from certain chronic diseases or even the onset of certain chronic diseases. Now, what as an elder of tomorrow, I want to prep myself looking into the future. So I think the important aspect of staying healthy, staying active at the current at our current stage, we look for products that could help us live better in the sense of promoting a good, healthy, active lifestyle to delay any onset of diseases that could impact us at a later stage. Now, for seniors who are unfortunately who are suffering from onset of chronic diseases, there are products and options to help us cope with that. So, for example, someone who is suffering from diabetes, we could look at different diabetes monitoring machines to help us track, and we could look into different altering our eating habits, for example, cutting down on carbohydrates. So talk to your doctor, talk to your endocrine to find out how we can actually manage and navigate around that. So the whole idea of how we are caring for our seniors today can be applied to how we care for ourselves as a future senior.
Thank you so much, Joseph. I think what you say is really important, especially nutrition. It's not only about what you eat, but it's also a holistic look at it. The emotional tools that you need to cope with decision making when it comes to nutrition and all the other aspects of it. So there's another question for that I would love for Sue to answer. So Sue, there's a question regarding home and surroundings. So there are people who are reluctant to change their furniture or they hoard stuff because of sentimental value. What do you say to them? What kind of advice or competency that they need to beef up in order to manage that kind of attachment to things?
Yeah, actually, I can relate to this. I have a really tough time throwing things away, actually, because I've got this sentimental value to everything. You know, I look at something and I've got this emotional attachment to it. So I can completely empathize with that. And, you know, I think it goes back to purpose that many people have talked about. And, you know, when I'm actually sourcing things out, you know, I will look at something and feel how I feel about it. And the stronger the emotional attachment to it, I'll keep it, or I'll think, okay, that's a, you know, not as strong an emotional attachment, so I'll put it to one side. And so I literally sort things not by using the logical aspect of my mind. Obviously, if it's crucial for, you know, some function in the house, then I won't throw it away. But everything else, I go through the process. Okay, how emotionally attached am I to this dress, for example? And it might be, oh yeah, I had my first date in that, I did this in that. Okay, I'll keep that. This one, you know, no, not really. I'll throw that away. So use not only your logic, use that emotional data, because it's 80,000 times faster than your logic. So it's good when you're sorting things that you're emotionally attached to figure out how emotionally attached you are or not to it.
And Jules, if I may add on to that.
Yes, Joseph.
Yeah, so I think earlier on I mentioned about creating new memories. So I think one of the attitude that we could adopt would be to constantly create new memories, and where we have sentimental value to certain things from the past, we need to take the courage to actually let go and start creating new memories as we go along. So one of the things I talk to seniors about would actually be how they want people to remember them for. And it could be something very personal, very small, and you could document your life differently. And so to that question about attitude and removing of certain bulky furnitures that have certain mental value, so redefine that. And that we are constantly evolving. So up to a certain point in time, I think we could look at what new values, new things can bring to us. And that's one area I feel that could be of meaning.
Thank you, Joseph. So having said that, can I just check in with Chris? Chris, I know that you advocate simplicity. So what is your response to that question when people to, you know, hoard stuff or keep stuff sentimental value? What would your solution to that be?
Well, if I was going to take being a good practicing Stoic, I would say that we should be very, very cautious around attaching any value to the things in our life. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't have any things in our life, right? It's not saying that we have to put on, you know, like very basic clothes and only very basic foods and things. We can have nice things in our life, but the way that the Stoics would think about it is that they would call these things indifferent. They make no difference to our pleasure in life and our ultimate happiness, but we might prefer having money over not having money. And we might prefer having health over we might prefer having health over illness. So it's just making sure that we try to build up a sense of detachment from the things in our life and really get to understand what the true meanings are.
Thank you, Chris. So, based on what you say, I would really love to invite Michelle. Michelle, can you answer maybe your personal opinion or perhaps your experiences? How well in advance should we say goodbye to our staff? And how well in advance should we leave our funeral arrangements and last wishes in life to our loved ones? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a very personal and subjective response for every individual, because for every person, uh, I mean, it depends on one's readiness to broach that topic, because not everyone would be ready and be willing to be have that open conversations about one's end of life arrangements. So for those who don't feel so ready to approach that topic, maybe we can go in a gentle way, by starting from light conversations about the experiences of his or her experiences of encountering death and dying experiences. Go in a gentle way, because this topic can be very heavy for some people who are not ready to discuss that further. Yeah.
So, Michelle, can I ask you one more question? What is your greatest take back out of this whole session?
I think I'm really, really very privileged and honored to hear from each and everyone's rich life experiences and wisdom from their expertise here. Yeah, so there's a lot of me to take back after this session.
Okay. How about you, Joseph? What's your greatest take back out of this session?
I think I've learned quite a lot from the emotional aspect of things, and especially from Michelle about dealing with the people who are entering the last stage of life. I think this is an area where there's a lot of not a lot of discussions around that, and something which can be for us to think about moving forward, to start conversations around the eventuality of life and all. And one of the things that we did at LDEX was to be able to encourage conversations around that. And very interestingly, based on what I have experienced, there are seniors who are more willing to talk about it and to talk about afterlife, while the younger generation tend to shy away from it. So I think there are areas that we could really look into and explore further.
Thank you, Joseph. How about you, Sue? What is your greatest take back for this session? What resonates most with you?
So I think just listening to everybody, we've got so many choices, and I think to hang on to the fact that we've got choices in our values, we've got choices in our purpose, we've got choices in our life, we've got choices in our death. There are things there to support us. And I really liked, I wrote down, aging well is an option. And I think that aging well is really an option. And when we use our wisdom and we use our purpose and we use our empathy and we build those relationships with people around us, just like the men and women in the end in the Harvard study, at the end of our lives, there's not as much regret.
Thank you, Sue. So, Chris, how about you? What's your greatest take back out of this session? What have you learned from others?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? We've looked at the cognitive and emotional side through Dr. Sue. Michelle's really opened all of our hearts to that calling and vocation. Joseph on the practical side as well. And I think the thing that for me ties all these different things together is that these journeys that we take in life and as we age are all deeply personal. And there isn't one piece of advice that works for everyone. And really the only answer or advice that, that I could give, and I maybe guess that the other panelists would agree with me, is that, these answers are found in deep reflection and really identifying what's personally important to us.
Thank you. I think that sums it all up, that really everyone's choices and everyone's decisions and everyone's the right decisions are actually very personalized. So having said that, I'd just like to wrap up all of your sharing, and I find it very particularly
Jules,
interesting.
sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, before you do, maybe you'd like to share with us what your greatest takeaway from the session was today.
Okay. Thank you for asking. I was about to say that. So basically, I do have a few sentences that I find that are very triggering, very, very inspiring. For example, being in the moment, appreciating the moment, and that empathy comes in 3 stages. Reminiscing happy moments with your loved ones, even if you are having conflicts with in your relationships, and that dying is not a failure at all. I think those are the things that really resonates with me. And having said that, shall we take a group picture, especially with the speakers? Because I feel that we have covered so much ground, and I hope that all the audience, both Facebook and Zoom, will bring back something that they can really reflect back and continue this journey of thinking about the meaning of their lives.